evening, everyone. Welcome. It's Wednesday, which means we are live for another episode in Adventures of Comprehension. I cannot believe we have been doing this now since January, talking week after week about everything we can with comprehension. And you know what? My list is still a mile long. I have so much to talk to you about. I hope you're enjoying these. Make sure to let me know that you are, or if you have any requests, of course, for anything comprehension related that we have not already talked about, make sure to drop a comment below and let me know. So, welcome. Grab a drink, grab a seat. Tonight, we're going to be talking all about everything main idea. So, I have 8 really important tips that I'm going to be going through with you tonight that hopefully will help you kind of steer some lessons or some students on the right track when it comes to identifying the main idea of a text. So again, my name is Sierra Harris. I am the author at Adventures of Room 129, and I'm coming to you live every Wednesday to talk all about comprehension. So if you have joined me before, comment below. As you know, let me know that you're watching, what's your name, where you're from, what do you teach, and I would love to know what the weather's like where you are. Is it super snowy? I've seen pictures of people with like feet of snow. Like, what's going on? Or is it sunny and warm? Here in Indiana, it's like 50s, so like perfect fall weather. But we've got some storms coming our way. Halloween, all that. It's just nah. So, anyways, let's get started with our next episode in Adventures of Comprehension. Like I said, we're going to be talking all things main idea, and I do have a wonderful freebie for you as well. So if you want the freebie at any time during the video, drop me a comment and say I want it, and I will send you the link specifically on your comment. So I'll reply right back to you with the link. It's not anywhere in the description. So just so you know, it's a little bit different than normal. All right, so 8 awesome tips for teaching main idea. Are you ready? If you are anything like me, maybe you currently are or you were like I was, main idea used to scare the bejesus out of me. It was one of those skills that I hated teaching because it was hard sometimes for me as a reader, and I didn't really understand how to break it down for students. I didn't understand how to make it concrete so that all of my students, regardless of what level of text they were reading, could identify the main idea of their text. And so year after year after year, I slowly grew my craft and understood this skill a little bit more, better by better, better and better, and finally to the point where I'm very, very confident on getting students to really hone in and understand what main idea is. So all of my struggles are your successes because I'm going to share all of that wonderful information with you. And I've kind of narrowed it all down into what I think are like the 8 most important tips to give you. I could probably list 100, but we're going to just go with 8, right? Okay, so tip number 1. When it comes to main idea, make sure that you are giving your students a starting point, okay? You can talk vocabulary all you want. What I mean by that is, don't just keep telling them over and over what main idea is. Main idea is the central message. Main idea is what the story is mostly about. Details are the events in the story that support the main idea, right? You can say that until your ears are blue. But what do the students actually need to be doing when they're reading, right? In order for them to become strategic readers and to build habits, we need to give them an action plan, right? It's kind of like that saying, a dream or a wish without an action plan is just like a wish or something. I don't know. I probably totally messed that up. But I think about that when I think about main idea, because a lot of teachers, we talk and talk and talk main idea, and we'll read a text and we'll show them some thinking. But what we're missing, what action steps do students need to take in order to be able to do it independently? That's our goal as teachers, right? We want students to be able to do this without us, okay? So the best thing you can do for your students is to break down main idea into 3 parts. What do students need to do before they read? What do they need to do while they're reading? And what do they need to do after they read? And so you can kind of cram all of those wonderful things that you probably are doing into like those 3 sections. And actually today's freebie is to help with this exact step. So I have this, I'm sorry, the camera's all, I never know where the camera is. um, I have this flip book for you. On the back, it does say main idea, gives a definition of main idea. And then on the front, there are 3 flaps. And you can see one says before, one says while, and one says after. And so you can actually give these to your students and have them jot in side the flaps while they're reading the text. And then they can do all of these different bullets, which I'm going to read to you in just a second. They can actually do them and jot notes or information in, and then boom, hopefully after they've done all 3 flaps, they're going to be able to deduce what the main idea of the text that they're reading is. And so using this foldable is a great way because students can be reading a text at their own level. You can be having a lesson on this exact strategy and your easily differentiation without having to do anything different. Awesome, right? Okay, so but what does this look like? What does this actually mean? Breaking it down into 3 steps: before, during, and after. So when students read a text, or before I should say they read the text, they need to know that they're analyzing for main idea, right? They need to know this, and they need to also know that as a reader, they need to do this every single time they read, okay? And as an early reader, this is not something that they have developed a habit for. So it doesn't matter if you're teaching characters, it doesn't matter if you're teaching theme, whatever you're teaching, you're going to have to prompt them. Make sure you're doing your main idea strategies because you're going to want to understand the main idea of the text in order to help you identify the theme. You're going to want to make sure you understand the main idea of the text in order to reassemble the plot. Main idea connects to everything. And so, in order to build these habits with our student, for them to be able to do this like us, when we sit down and read, we don't have to get out a piece of paper like this or a foldable. We don't have to remind ourselves to look for the main idea. We just know to do it. We've got to get them to that point. And so building that habit is that repetition of reminding them to look for and modeling and going through and teaching all these strategies. Okay, so I feel like I keep holding this up and like tempting you with what all this is. So before, during, and after. Before you read, what do teachers or students need to look for, right? Well, they need to read the title. I know you're doing that already. I know you're teaching that already. They need to read the title and understand what the title is about. What schema do they already have about the title? What questions do they have about the title? The title is giving them a lot of extra information, important information that they're going to need in order to identify the main idea. Also, think about the topic. So the title is going to give you a very big clue to the topic. And I know a lot of teachers use topic as an introduction to main idea, and I love that. I think it's great. And topic is something that if students can identify the topic, they're not going to be able to identify the main idea. So get them to identify the topic before they even read. And then also look at the cover images, the illustrations, the photographs, whatever's on the cover. Analyze those cover images and kind of put all this information together. I even have my students make predictions about main idea because I really want them to understand that there's so much power to the cover of that book about main idea before they even read. If there's not a cover, if you're reading a passage like on paper, that's fine. The title, and if there's one image, look at that. If there are no images, that's fine too. The title can give you a lot of information, but make sure that they know that they need to be getting their brains ready to be able to do all of these steps to find the main idea when they are done. So the during reading, of course, has the most meat in it. And there's a lot of different things that students need to be looking for and thinking about in order to identify main idea when they're done reading. So on here, it says to analyze text features. Obviously, that's for nonfiction. They need to identify the genre. The genre actually does weigh in to main idea, specifically because the main idea of nonfiction and the main idea of fiction are kind of 2 different things. So we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. They need to look through the story for important repeated words. So if they see a name like Abraham Lincoln over and over and over and over and over again, they better, deduce that Abraham Lincoln has something to do with the main idea. They're also going to read headings if there are any, reread your first and your last sentence. That more so goes when it's more of a paragraph article type, maybe not so entirely an entire book. And one thing, I thought it was up here, but I forgot. Make sure they read the table of contents. This goes for fiction and nonfiction. Okay, make sure they scan that and look through all those chapters and start thinking, what do all of these chapters have to do with one another? Or if you're just analyzing the main idea of one chapter, then have them look at the other chapters too and compare and contrast them. So that's before, that's during, and then after they read. There are two really important things that I want my students to stop and think about after they read their text. First, what is the most important point that you think the author wants you to know? Write it down. And then also, think about all the details that you just read. What do they all have in common? So again, they would go through their text that they're reading. They would use as much of these bullet points as they can and jot down notes that they're reading from their text. And then by the end, they should be able to kind of put all this information together. They can open them all up and kind of scan back through everything that they've written and be able to give you a main idea. Again, it's all about giving students a starting point, giving them something that they can do, actionable steps that they can do in order to identify the main idea. Instead of just us teaching about the vocabulary and modeling it, put actionable steps in students' hands. So if you want this foldable, comment below with the words I want it, or I want the freebie, or something of that sort. Let me know and I will give you the link to that. All right, so that is tip number 1. Tip number 2 is a really good one, and it's one that teachers sometimes don't think about, but I feel it's really important. And that is to use non-examples when it comes to main idea. So a lot of the times students will, when we're working on main idea, when they get the main idea wrong, they really don't understand why. Because to them, it was the main idea. Because their thinking hasn't been narrowed and chiseled like ours, where, when we read a text, we know this is the main point. And sometimes a book or an article can have more than one main point. And so it's hard for students to kind of do that deductive reasoning to figure out, why is my answer wrong? I don't understand. So it's our job when we're teaching main idea to show students both sides. Teach main idea the right way, meaning show them the correct answer as much as you can, but you also need to show them incorrect answers and explain to them why. Show them details and explain to them why this main idea and this main idea would not be strong enough and why this one would be the best answer. So whether you're doing it with multiple choice or whether you're doing it with open-ended, it doesn't matter, but take the time to actually go through wrong answers. When a student gives you a wrong answer, don't just be like, no, let's think again. I want you to think harder, and then call on another student and get the right answer. Take time. Pull that student's answer up, write it on the board, and take 5 minutes or so to go over it. Probably not 5 minutes, more like 2 or 3. But go over their answer. You're going to get so much better and stronger right answers if students are able to understand why wrong answers are wrong. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 for teaching main idea is to practice reading without titles, okay? And this is a fun activity that you can do. You can do this with books or articles or magazines that you have in your classroom. Take some Post-it notes and things and tape it over. Put them in your center and let students go through and choose which one they want to read. Let them read the article or read the book and see if they could create the title. Because what that is definitely doing is building their ability to identify the main idea through the creativity of making a title. So, and then it's cool because then they can take the Post-it notes off and then they can compare and contrast their title to what the author titled it and kind of see what the similarities and differences are. Were they far off? And if they were totally far off, then that probably means their main idea was not on point. So then they can go back and figure out. And so you can even do like a little writing activity afterwards for them to compare and contrast. How similar were your answers or your title versus the author's title, and why. Tell me about the differences. What similarities, what differences were there? So practice reading without titles and getting students to create those titles in reverse is a really fun and interesting way to get that main idea practice in. All right, we're ready for tip number 4. Okay, so I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but it's really important for students to understand that when you're identifying main idea, there's a difference between main idea in fiction and and main idea in nonfiction. So in fiction, and this is the definition that I know a lot of us use, it is what is the story mostly about. So you take this entire story and you kind of summarize it really in like a sentence. That's basically what you're doing, right? The story was about a boy who collected recycling materials to donate to build a playground. Great. It's almost like a one sentence summary. But in nonfiction, it's different. You're not telling you what the whole story was about. You kind of need to switch gears and put on a different lens. In this case, for nonfiction, you need to teach your students that it's about the author. And what does the author want me, the reader, to know about this topic? Okay? What is the most important thing the author wants me to know? Because we have different type of reading when it comes to fiction and nonfiction, our skills that we use in reading and the way that we think in those when we read those types of text are going to be different. And it's really important that we vocalize that with our students. So when we're teaching main idea, make sure that you are teaching it differently for both of those genres. All right, tip number 5. We're breezing through this. I promise it's going to be a quick one tonight. So tip number 5 is a big one, and it's to make sure that when you are teaching main idea is to provide natural scaffolding. Here's what I mean by that. I don't mean differentiation. I mean, when you're teaching, when you start out teaching main idea versus when you've taught main idea for a few weeks or months and you've reviewed it, the way you teach it at the beginning should very much look different than the way you're teaching it at the end, okay? And this goes for any grade. If I taught first grade, this is how I would do it. If I taught fifth grade, this is how I would do it, okay? You need to make sure that you're starting basic and moving your way into the more advanced thinking. So basic means use objects. No words, no text at all. Use objects to get students to understand what main idea is. Pull 5 objects out of a bag. See if you can figure out what the main idea would be if these objects were in a text. Okay? So use objects. Then move your way to pictures or photographs. If you were to create a main idea based on what's happening in this photograph, what would it be? And see if 3 or 4 different students could come up with 3 or 4 different main ideas and justify them. Again, no text at all, but they're still having to use details, and you can still have that conversation about how details support main idea, and how a text could have technically one more main idea, but you're being able to do that, excuse me, without having students read. So what are you doing with both of these different ways to teach? You're getting to all of your students, even the ones who struggle reading, are still able to understand what main idea is and how to use it. So what comes after pictures? Words, single words. Again, give them a word bank, what the main idea would be for all these words. What do all these words have in common? Because what do those words turn into next? They turn into details. Then afterwards, then you would use sentences. After sentences come paragraphs. So if you teach an upper grade, maybe you don't go all the way back and start at objects, and that's fine. But maybe you do need to start with pictures. Maybe you want to get your students understanding main idea by using photographs, because you do have a wide range of students and they all need to be understanding and kind of on that same level of understanding what this skill really is. So you're going to start with pictures, then move to sentences, and then move to paragraphs. Okay? Or maybe you teach first grade and you need to start all the way at objects and you want to move yourself all the way up to sentences or paragraphs. So again, the tip is to provide that natural scaffolding. If all we do is jump straight into paragraph every single time we teach, then we're not teaching this concretely enough for our students to understand, because it is a very vague not black and white, gray area type of skill. And we want our students to really have as much concrete understanding as possible. All right, detail number 6 is to start with details. And I don't mean that when you're teaching main idea that you should teach details first necessarily, but sometimes this can benefit a lot of students. And here's why. Details sometimes tend to be harder for students. I can't tell you how many times that they were able to identify a main idea, but then they would pick a detail that didn't support it at all. There are so many details to choose from that they just kind of picked one thinking that, it's in the same text, it's in the same book, it has to match, right? No. Only certain details match the main idea. And so because they struggled with that, I needed to switch. I kind of switched things up, and instead I gave a lot of my focus on details instead of the main idea. And here's what that did for me. When we started with details, we were able to look at details and we were able to figure out which details in this text are important and why are those important. I want you to pick your 5 most important details and tell me why. Why are these important? Or we would be able to look at all the details in the text and figure out, what do all these details have in common? How are they alike? The more that the students understood details, the better off they were at identifying the main idea. So sometimes we need to take a step back as teachers and kind of reflect and think, am I giving main idea too much push and not details not enough? And if that's the case and students are struggling, then we need to reverse it. Focus in on really teaching details as much as possible because that's going to support main idea even more. All right, we have 2 left. We're on detail, or not detail. Clearly, I've said the word detail way too much. We're on tip number 7. Tip number 7 is a really odd one, but it's one that I stumbled upon. And it's how students use the word why or how when they're trying to write or verbalize the main idea. These words this is weird, but for some reason, when I have students who are like, I know they've got the main idea up here, they just don't know how to put it in the form of a sentence. I tell them to use the word how or why at the beginning of their sentence, and somehow they're able to do it. This does work a little bit better with nonfiction than it does with fiction. So let's say they're reading a story and it's all about, a penguin and how it's hatched from an egg and how it grows up and this and this and that, whatever. And their student knows that it's all about penguins and they know it's all about like baby penguins, but they can't figure out how to tell me more about that. I'll say, use the word how. And they'll say, the story is about how baby penguins grow up. And that one word for some reason holds a lot of power to them. Same thing with the word why. Maybe they read a book about, George Washington. And it was about George Washington during his presidency and all the wonderful things that he did for our country. And so they'll be like, it's about George Washington. And I'll say, okay, use the word why. And they'll say, the story is about why George Washington was such an awesome president. Now, these words, how and why, they don't get the best answer. They don't give students, this amazing, oh my gosh, you just blew my mind, main idea answer. But it's going to give them a starting point. It's going to give your students who know something up here and just can't get it out here, they're going to have a word to start with. So the word how and why, for some reason, have some secret power when it comes to main idea. Trust me. All right, my last tip for you tonight is tip number 8, and that is to make sure that at some point when you are teaching main idea, to take time and have students sort through details, but when they're going through their details, they're sorting them by, are the details important versus are they unimportant? And this is actually a really great intervention activity. Sometimes I kind of keep this idea on the back burner and I keep it for my students who end up struggling with main idea because it is such a strong way to get students to really analyze a text, kind of sort what all the information that's in there, important versus unimportant, and then look at that important details. Look at all those details and figure out, okay, now what do these all have in common? Now we can go back to kind of even this and look at repeated words or the first and last sentence or stuff like that based on the details that we have pulled out. So again, a great intervention activity, or one if you know your entire class really is struggling with main idea. This is one I would do whole group as well, but really have them analyze and look at sorting all the details, important versus unimportant, prior to making their decision on what the main idea of the text is. Okay, so wow, we have just talked about 25 minutes, right? All about main idea. I've given you 8 amazing tips. And again, if you would love this freebie that I talked about at the beginning of our session today, make sure you drop me a comment and say I want it or I want the freebie, and I will send you personally the link to it. If you don't know what this is and you came in a little bit late, you may want to wait and go watch the replay, because this is a really awesome strategy that you can use to help teach your students main idea. So if you have any main idea questions, please feel free to drop them below. I also will have this video coming out as a blog post here in the next few weeks. That way, if you want to have a place to save all this great information, or weren't taking notes or anything like that, it's coming soon. So keep an eye out on my blog, adventuresofroom129.com, and very soon this will be coming out there for you to read as well. So if you have any questions, let me know. If you love tonight's session, let me know. And if you have any requests for upcoming Facebook Lives that have to do with comprehension, let me know. All right, so I think that's it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.